Hey y'all, and welcome back to another episode. Today we're going to continue on with our astrology series. So in our last episode, we talked about the differences between astrology and astronomy and their shared history. Now, there are several different types of astrology, but we're going to start with the Western concept of astrology, like modern astrology as we know it today, because I feel like that's what a lot of people are familiar with when we talk about astrology. In this series, we're going to talk about all of them though. So I'm really excited about that because I think it's a really good idea for us to have a full concept to see which form of astrology we relate to, what gives us the most information. And I just think that, I haven't seen anybody do that yet. So I'm really interested to kind of go on this journey when it comes to astrology and numerology, because they really are the most ancient sciences that we have. I think we kind of owe it to ourselves to explore that. And take it back to the beginning. Who started astrology? Like, what was their methods then? And then what are their methods now? Because that could help you in whatever your journey is with trying to learn astrology, trying to learn about your birth chart and things like that. So today we're going to start talking about the planetary chain. So we'll talk about the luminaries, which are, the sun, the moon, Mercury, Mars, Venus.
I'm finding it.
It take you that long to find it?
It does.
And the other planets that are part of the main 7 planets, okay? So today we're going to start with the sun. And even if you think about the sun, y'all, how do y'all feel when we enter into springtime? Like everything comes alive. I come alive. I look like a whole different person. Now all of a sudden I'm golden and I'm glowing and I look like I got makeup on and I really don't have makeup on, okay? The sun does a lot of good things for us, and the ancient Egyptians understood that. So this whole idea of us coming from an unadvanced civilization does not make sense to me, because I don't think that we were unadvanced. I think that we fell in consciousness at some point, and then manipulative forces came in and took advantage of that. Okay. So today we're going to learn a lot about the sun, but if we're going to talk about the sun and we're going to talk about the history of the sun, we have to talk about the ancient sun gods. And that varied. The name of that varied from region to region, okay, from civilization to civilization. However, the archetype for the sun was the same. Okay, so we'll start with the Egyptians. We'll talk just a little bit about them before we move into the actual sun gods themselves, because I feel like when we talk about astral worship, it always leads right back to the ancient Egyptians. And the ancient Egyptians were actually during the period of the golden age. And that's where we're in right now, where we have access to this higher level of consciousness. Okay. So I think this is coming right on time. All right. So as we know from the previous episode, the sun is central to everything, even ancient worship, and still is at the heart of many religions today. So the Egyptians had a different name for the sun depending on where it was in the sky. But they also had multiple names for where it was in the sky as well. So I'm going to put together a chart so I can put on the screen so you guys can kind of follow along and see what I'm talking about. But the overall deity for the Egyptians was Ra. Okay. Amen-Ra. Now there are stories about Amen-Ra. A lot of people believe that these are just archetypes, and other people believe that he was an Anunnaki god. Okay. I don't know which one of them is true. I just keep myself open to the information. Okay. And I plan to prove or disprove that as we go along. Okay. But I don't know any specific evidence of this actually being true. However, I have seen CIA photos of some god that they were going after. He was in a casket. He was frozen. He looked like us. And supposedly he was supposed to be one of these gods Anunnaki gods that they talked about back in the day. So I don't really know, because I cannot tell what's true and what's false. And I think they put out all this misinformation to try to confuse our minds. So what I'm going to say is that I'm open to exploring the idea of that, but just want to give y'all all the information. Okay. Now, Ra was the supreme deity, meaning that Ra was the overall name for the sun. Okay. So usually if it was Amen-Ra, it would be Amen-Ra. If it was Set, it would be Set-Ra. So everything kind of came from had this name Ra. However, when the sun was the highest in the sky at noontime, that's when they usually would call the sun Ra, because it was at its highest capacity, right? He was the sun god. Okay. Now, anytime you see a photo of Ra, he has the sun over his head. And he also has association to the god Horus, who was always seen with the sun in one hand and the moon in the other hand. Now, Horus is where we get the saying horizon, right? Because Horus is rising. Usually when they call the sun Horus, they're talking about the sun that is rising in the sky. Okay. Now, Kepri is another name that they used to use for that rising sun. Atum was the name for the setting sun, but they also used to use the deity Set as well. Ra Harakti was the sun at noon, which is just Ra's name. Okay, Amun Ra, Ra Harak. There's so many different names for this guy. That's the sun at noon, but they also had a name for the disk of the sun, and they used to call it at 10. Now, when Pharaoh Akhenaten came along, he actually made Aten the supreme deity or the supreme creator deity of everything. Because he had this beef with Ra. I don't know what it was, but he came in and he wanted to make a name for himself. And so he started to try to restructure what the gods' names were, which was a lot different from what the ancient Egyptian gods used to call the sun. Okay. So he was around between 1353 to 36 BCE. Now, there is a name for when the sun is not in the sky, and that usually goes to the Egyptian pharaoh Osiris, or the Egyptian pharaoh is named after this god or deity Osiris, because at nighttime, Isis is in the sky. Isis is the moon. Osiris is the sun, or the black sun, when the sun is in the underworld. Okay. So we'll kind of explore that concept a little bit more as we move along in this idea of like the Book of Wisdom. Okay. Now, you may have heard of Horus and Ra before, because the Eye of Horus and the Eye of Ra actually come from these two gods. And we talked about these in the Book of Wisdom. Okay. Now, the Eye of Horus and the Eye of Ra are actually structured like the pineal gland in the center of the brain. Okay. If you know anything about the pineal gland contains crystals. And once that gland starts to activate, it's about the size of like a little, I wouldn't even say a pea because it's bigger than that. It's like the size of like a lima bean. Okay. And once that starts compressing those crystals, right, we start to see visions. Okay. So usually this is why we're dreaming, is because of this pineal gland. Now, you might want to ask yourself, why would they have stuff structured like the pineal gland? Even their little bird, I'll show you a picture of the little bird inside the brain. All of that is talking about the pineal gland. And the reason why they were often talking about the pineal gland, right? And they talk about the sun's effect on the pineal gland, because the Eye of Ra, the Eye of Horus, is talking about the sun, right? That means that these people were not an unintelligent group of people. Okay. They actually had something called the Egyptian Book of Dead, where they were actually studying astral travel. And the reason why they were studying lucid dreaming and astral travel is because they knew when you passed on that you were still a spirit, and your spirit has to go, or you're still a soul and your soul has to go somewhere, right? So the Egyptian Book of the Dead was how they prepared for death, which was astral traveling to the astral realm and preparing a home there, so that when they were about to pass away, they could astral travel out of their body and go directly to where they were supposed to go. Okay. You can find all this in the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Okay. But basically, I'm saying that to say that these people were not unintelligible people. These people actually were really, really advanced spiritually in a way that we aren't. So that goes to question what happened, right? Why did we fall in consciousness so much from 12,000 years ago, right? It's a good question. Now, let's talk about the different sun gods. I'm going to start with Ra. When I talk about Egypt, I'm just going to talk about Ra. I'm not going to talk about the other gods, because Ra is the supreme deity. Okay. The reason why I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about Ra is because there are other civilizations that worship Ra as well. Okay. So, he was the king of gods and was often thought to be the creator of everything. He is the reason, again, why we say amen, because his name was Amun Ra, and he wanted people to call out his name. Or the Anunnaki God version of him wanted people to call out his name. So he's the reason why we say amen. Okay. We're acknowledging Ra, the sun. We are actually thanking the sun god, Ra. Okay. So he was worshipped so much that people started to believe that the Egyptians really had hid their monotheistic ways, meaning that they were really under one God, even though they were claiming all these other gods, right? Even though they were worshiping all these other gods, Ra was seen to be like the main deity. Okay, the pyramids were actually built as solar temples to help the kings connect to the sun god. And that's why there are no other pyramids that are actually designed like this one that let light in the way that they do, or let the sun in the way that they do. It was actually thought to help kings to connect to Ra. Now, Ra again is typically associated with the sun when it's at its highest point at noon. He was considered to be the son of order, kings, and the sky. One of his main jobs was to carry the sun across the sky to light the day. He is often depicted as having a falcon head for this reason. Sometimes they use the ancient scarab beetle to represent him as well, but mainly it's in relationship to Kepher or Horus. Now, there are other people who actually pray to Ra or worship Ra as well. The Maoris people of New Zealand, they used Ra for both the sun and the day. Okay, so they worship Ra for the sun and the day. Now, the Greco-Romans, which are just the Greeks and the Romans together, okay, they named the sun god Helios or Sol, S-O-L. Like God Soul, if you saw the Astro Worship episode. Now, he was always depicted riding in on 4 horses in a chariot, which sounds really familiar from that Astro Worship episode. Worshippers of Astrology, which is the old name for Christianity, right, use this imagery to represent Christ. Anytime they said Christ, they were talking about they usually depicted him riding in on those 4 horses, okay? Now, he's also depicted with the sun behind his head and was considered the son of righteousness, okay? So I'll put up a picture of Helios so that you can see him. Every time you see these sun gods, you'll see the sun behind their head. You'll also see the sun behind Jesus's head because Jesus is the sun, okay? But that's neither here nor there. We'll get there later. Now, they represented the sun's creativity in god Apollo. So they actually had 2 different deities, kind of like the Egyptians had 4 different deities, really a couple different deities for the sun. The ancient Greco-Romans had 2. They had Helios and Sol, but they also had Apollo. And Apollo just represented that creativity of the sun. So he was known as the patron of life, of truth, of prophecy, medicine, healing, music, poetry, and art. That's why he's always, like, every time you see him, he looks like so poetic, like he's so just in touch with his feminine side. So he was also the leader of muses. Okay, she's a muse. Now, they believe that if you did not honor or worship Apollo, then plague and illness would cause destruction in the land. So they always worship them separately. So the ancient Babylonians, they called their sun god Shamash, and he was considered to be a part of the astral triad of divinity, along with Sin, who was the moon god, and Ishtar, who is the goddess of Venus. Now, his gifts were the power of light over darkness and evil. He was also considered to be the god of justice, so the judge of gods and men, not just the gods themselves, but he also judged men as well, and equity. So at night, Shamash became the judge of the underworld, which is very, very similar to Osiris's job in ancient Egyptian belief. Okay, do you see the correlation? Okay, now he also was considered the governor of the whole universe, and like others, he was often depicted with the sun disk behind his head. The Celtics called their sun god Lu, which means to bind by oath. Now, he was considered to be a part of the Irish legends. He was called the might god of light, the oath keeper, master of craft and war, and nobility. He is often worshipped in August when the sun is at full power and strength and the corn is sun yellow. In their legend, the sun god Lu is sacrificed back to the land, and when this happens, winter is coming. Now, doesn't that sound a lot like the Lord of the Good crossing over the celestial equator or being crucified as he enters into this season that is ruled by the Lord of Evil, right? He's sacrificed back to the land. He's crucified. Okay, correlations. I'm just trying to connect the dots. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and check out the Astro Worship episode part 1. I'm telling you, that is a good play. That starts our book series, but all of this information goes together because we're trying to connect the dots. Okay, now, Lu was known as the illuminator of light and wisdom. He is always depicted with his magical sphere, which was considered to be alive and bloodthirsty. So it knew no bounds. It would not rest unless it was under a sleep potion or under the influence of poppies. And if you know anything about poppies, poppies is cocaine. Okay? So I thought that was really funny because I'm like, what? So fire actually would explode through this sphere and it would rip through its enemies in battles. Okay. So he was considered to kind of be like more like a warrior. Now the Hindus called their sun god Sara, and also known as Atya. And he is led by 7 horses, which I assume represent the planets. The word Sara means sun and sun god in Hindu. There are several temples dedicated to Sara because he used to be considered a part of that triune deity. Okay. So Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva plus Sara was like he was a part of that deity group. Okay. So there was only a small group of Brahmins called the Sauras that worship the sun god Sara instead of the triune deity, along with Sakti and Ganesh. Now, Sara was considered to be the father of many gods like Manu, the creator of human race, Yama, the god of the dead, the Ashvins, the twin physicians of the gods, Karna, a great warrior, and Sigriva, the king of monkeys. According to Hindu myth, the legends, weapons of war from the gods were made using parts from Sara, okay, which is just the sun. Now, he was thought to cure darkness, illness, and also heated up and lit up the world. Ancients in India, also Nepal, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, practice Ayurveda, which is a traditional medicine system. They believe that the sun's gift was life and heat, which they referred to as prana, which back then just meant energy. And prana today is often used when we're talking about life force energy. Okay. So they actually had medical practices that associated with the sun as well. Now, Norse sun goddess name is Sol. Okay. Now, the Norse people are the Germanic mythology or Scandinavia. Okay. This is the only sun god that is actually a woman, and the name is Sol, like God's soul, if you saw the Astro Worship episode. Now, this is the only woman sun god. Usually the sun is masculine because it is electric, and the moon is feminine because it is magnetic, but in Norse mythology, it is switched around. She's responsible for bringing light to the world, and her brother Mani rules the night as the god of the moon. She is often depicted as shining really bright. She has 2 horses, Arvarkar, the early rise, and Alsvar, which pulls her chariot across the sky. Sol is being chased by a wolf named Skull, who represents darkness and the end of the world. This struggle between her and Skull is supposed to represent the battle between light and darkness. Now, there are several other sun gods. Like the Persians had Mithra, who was worshipped in ancient Persia and later in the Roman Empire, but same thing. They're all depicted with the sun behind their head, and they rule pretty much the same things. Mithra was responsible for season change and cosmic order. So I hope you guys can see the theme between these different ancient sun gods. Now, most kings and rulers would often look to the sun to help them make sure that their people had what they needed. Okay. So the sun was really important because it was how they determined when the season was going to change. So it's how they basically prepared their year. But the sun was also how they organized their day. Okay. And it still is to this day. We just are not aware of the concept. So I'm trying to bring it to your awareness. So as you can see, a lot of the ancient gods were just physical representations of the planets. So you'll see that most of them have the sun behind their head when we're talking about the sun gods. I think it's important for us to talk about this because we have to know where things start before we can ever understand them. And if we knew that all the ancient gods were solar fables, our entire perspective would shift, okay? And we could connect the dots appropriate, but a lot of the stories are the same with minor changes, which we see as we continue through history of the main 7 planets. In a sense, a lot of us have not heard Greek mythology, Roman mythology, Greco-Roman mythology. You know, we haven't talked about the Norse gods, right? Because a lot of us have not had access to that information or have not been aware of that information. We haven't been able to connect the dots. And what they tend to do, and what I realize that they tend to do, is they try to keep everything so fucking separate so that we don't realize that everything is one. Everything is talking about the same thing. It's just everybody is doing it their own way. Okay. It's kind of like the idea of everybody trying to have their own title, everybody trying to have their own gender specific term. It's the same thing. They create that dynamic between us so that we don't see that everything is connected. And that's part of being in your lower ego is separation, right? Because the lower ego sees you as being different from everybody else, right? Which disconnects you from spirit because you don't realize that you are all the same thing. You are all God energy, a whole piece of God energy, exploring different variables. We all have the same fucking goal, but we get the free will to explore it the way that we want to, right? And if they can keep us separate and keep us arguing and keep us focusing on our differences, we will never see that we are all working towards the same goal and we are all the same. We're just at different places on the spectrum. Okay. And that lower ego sucks because it fuels comparison, it fuels judgment, it fuels hatred against other people, it fuels people being more in service to self and not caring about other people, not having consideration, compassion, empathy, not being forgiving towards other people. And we're moving into this heart space energy, and we're starting to feel that fourth density energy where we experience compassion, love, and forgiveness, which is associated with the heart space. Okay. The heart space is the bridge to the higher planes. Earth is moving up. So you either going to go with her or you going to stay in this lower energy. Okay. Which is very much so like energy vampires sucking the fucking life out of you. All right. So that's what I'm trying to do with this series. I'm just trying to help us to see that everything is one religion, which is the religion of spirit. Everything is talking about the sun. There are no actual fucking gods, right? You yourself can experience hell or heaven on earth. All right. Because we're in this plane of duality where everything is separate. So that means you could be a god or you could be evil. And evil is not a bad word. It just means matter. You can be spirit or light energy, or you could be heavy light energy, dense light energy, which is matter. Okay. The goal is to become less material or less magnetic and become more electric, like the sun. And then when you become more electric, you gain access to your the spiritual side of you, right? Because you can pass through that heart space. You can directly connect to the divine. And that helps you on your journey of evolution. Okay. So the significance of the sun is that it is literally the most important celestial body in our universe, and it divides our day into morning and evening. It's literally how most of us organize our day, which is what the ancients used it for as well. It also divides our seasons. Our entire existence is organized around the sun, and I don't think a lot of people realize that. Now, you might ask why the Egyptians care so much, and the answer is quite simple. They depended on the sun to survive. They understood that the seasons change and that there were going to be times when the sun was hot and everything was abundant, but there'll also be times where it wasn't so hot, and so they needed to prepare for that. So they would measure where the sun would rise and set on the horizon, and they would also take notice of how hot the sun was at noon, and that would tell them where they were in that trajectory of the sun starting to get further away from Earth. Okay. So in midwinter, the sun was at its lowest. So during this time, they would perform rituals devoted to the sun's climb back to the highest point, which is why the pyramids are organized going up in this ascending manner. But then on the other end, they descend and then they wanted to ascend again. Okay. So they didn't know back then, but now we know that the seasons happen due to the Earth's tilt. Okay. So let's take a second to talk about what the sun is associated with. Okay. And then we'll talk about symbols and stuff. Okay. So the sun is associated with the number 1, which supreme deity, obviously. It's also associated with the symbol that's a circle and a dot in the middle, but that's what we associate the sun with now. Back in the ancient Egyptian times, the symbol that we consider to be the earth now is actually what they consider to be the sun. So that circle that's divided into 4 quadrants, right? The 4 quadrants represented the 4 seasons. So the sun would follow this trajectory around the 4 seasons. And that's why they had the symbol for the sun is what we consider the symbol for earth. And I'll put it on the screen so you guys can see it. It's associated with the day Sunday. Yeah. It's associated with the colors yellow and gold, sometimes orange as well. In modern astrology, it's associated with the color orange. The part of the body is going to be the heart, the upper back, the spleen, the circulatory system. The metal that it's associated with is gold. Stones are amber and topaz. Herbs and incense are going to be myrrh, musk, and frankincense. Now that should ring a bell, because if you watch the astro worship episode, when the three wise men of the East came to give their thanks to Mary, who had just given birth to Jesus, what did they bring them? They brought them gold, myrrh, and frankincense. Okay? Ding, 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 ding. Jesus represents the sun. These are the herbs and the metal that are associated with the sun. Okay? I hope the math is mathing. All right, now plants are going to be sunflowers and birch. Chakra is the solar plexus, which is the yellow chakra. The sun rules over Leo, okay, which means that the sun is also associated with the heart chakra. The sun rules the fifth house in astrology, which we'll talk about later on. But the fifth house is about romance, love affairs, play, creativity, fertility, the childlike spirit, joy, self-expression, and drama. Okay, Apollo. Think Apollo. Think Apollo. The creativity of the sun. Okay, it's exalted in Aries and it falls in Libra. Okay, Libra is judgment day because it's judging the sun. And the sun has a 1-year cycle. Now, let's talk about what the sun symbolizes. And we're going to talk about this in 3 parts. We're going to talk about what the ancients believed. We're going to talk about what the esoterics believe, because the esoteric just means hidden knowledge. Okay, these are going to be the occultists. This is going to be what not everybody knew about. And then we're going to talk about modern day, what we consider the sun to represent. Okay, so the ancients believed that the sun represented power, manifestation, life force, self-expression, or how we project ourselves upon the people we experience. It's also how we create, but this is limited to artistic creation. How we bring pleasure to ourselves and how we bring pleasure to others. Okay. Another way to kind of describe that is basically how you having fun impacts other people. Okay, that's what they believe. How you having fun impact other people around you. Now, there's also a youthfulness to the sun. So it represents this childlike energy, kind of like the Fool's card in tarot, which is this guy who's like holding a backpack and he's stepping out into the unknown and he looks so fucking jolly. His dog is just following him blindly and he's looking up and he don't even realize that he about to step off to a fucking cliff. Okay. It's that childlike naivety actually would be associated with the sun. Okay. But there were also cons to the sun's influence as well. So it can lead people to be very egocentric, meaning that they become self-focused and uninterested in the interests of other people, which can be harmful. It can also blind us to our own achievements because the sun is a powerhouse that is constantly on the move, right? And so it could be really hard for us to just stop and just sit and be satisfied with what we have done. So when we're influenced by this energy, we become the same, like we become moving constantly. Okay. And we can ignore our achievements and become acceptant of our failures and shortcomings too easily, meaning like we only become focused on the negative and not on the positive that's happening because we're constantly trying to reach something, constantly trying to get to the next thing. It also makes us ignore what's in our best interest as well. Now, esoterically, they believe that it represents the soul's essence and enlightenment. So they believe that the sun's light was also all-knowing and that our self-expression was most authentic when working with the energy of our sun sign. For example, Leo is ruled by the sun and Leo is about self-expression. People who have Leo as their sun sign tend to be creators. They tend to be infectious with their life force energy or their capacity to live because they have more of a optimistic disposition and they are people who want to grow or develop, and they tend to be very generous, enthusiastic, and open. That can go to be said for all the fire signs. Okay. That's literally like their whole fucking vibe is to bring this spontaneity to life, like this childlike energy to life. They bring warmth and excitement to anyone they come into contact with. Not enough people talk about how expansive Leos are. Okay. And if you think about the sun itself is expansive. The only sign that it rules is Leo. Leo is very much so like that sun energy at its purest form. Okay. They also believe that the sun had pitfalls as well, like arrogance, individualism, and insecurity. This is also seen in Leo. Now, Leo is a masculine sign and is ruled by the element of fire. Fire signs are the most generous signs. They are the most generous signs, but they are also the most arrogant sign. Arrogance is going to be in the room with them. Okay. Now, This is just my opinion, and I feel like a lot of people don't talk about this when they're talking about Leos. Usually we get Leos are attention whores, and they love the spotlight, basically labeling them like self-centered and overly confident, which again is just another word for arrogance. But I have never, and I mean I have never met a Leo who is not deeply insecure. Yeah, argue with your mama about that. I have never met a Leo who is not insecure at the core. And I'll die on that hill.
I said what I said. Okay, well, what you said was some bull. But you don't like it, you don't like it.
Now, esoterically, they also thought that when the sun was not balanced, that it results in selfishness. It results in vanity, meaning caring about material things only. And it resorts in, or it appears in self-centeredness. They also mentioned in this esoteric astrology book that I have, y'all. I love this book. Hold on, let me show y'all. Boom. This book is from the Library of Esoterica, and it's the astrology book. Y'all, this book is so beautiful. Love this book. Love this book. And it just gets more gorgeous by the day. Yeah, look at that. A work of art. A work of art. I got that from Barnes and Nobles, y'all. Very easy to find. All right. But in this book, they said that the seasons often correlate to human life cycles from youth, maturity, middle age, and old age. That's something I talked about when we talked about that astro worship episode. Here's another resource pointing at that same thing. The sun, again, being used to organize our life cycle as well as the life cycle of Earth and the universe. Literally, the sun not only organizes our life cycles, it organizes Earth's life cycle because Earth is revolving around the sun, and it organizes the universe's life cycle because every planet is revolving around the sun. I thought that was important to mention because the Astro Worship book by J.H. Hill that we're reviewing in the book series, right, also says the same thing that this esoteric book says as well. Okay, so this book also talks about how occultists and alchemists believe that the spirit of the sun manifested as gold in the physical form. So that's why gold is considered to be the most sacred of the precious metals, because gold is considered to be solidified light, meaning like the sun manifests as gold on this planet. That's what they believed esoterically. Now, modern day, the sun is associated with your identity and your life purpose. It also represents self-development and creative fulfillment. In short, purpose or your true path. The sun organizes how the other planets interact with us. This can be associated with the concept of self from the psychologist Carl Jung. He plays a big part when it comes to astrology, when it comes to your ego and stuff like that. Once you know yourself, the sun helps you to recognize your true path. That's basically what it means by your purpose. Okay. Once you actually get to know yourself, your sun represents like your core values. It's the parts of you that it don't matter who the fuck come in. Those parts are not going to change. That's who you are as your core. It's like your moral fucking compass. And once you can recognize what those things are and you can set boundaries around things that kind of go against what those things are, right? When you can love yourself in your truest form and you stick to who you are and what you know authentically, then the path that is laid out for you will start to reveal itself. Okay. It's also responsible for vitality. This is where you can be vibrant and radiant. This is where you inspire others and where you have the capacity to lead. And this can be, but the thing about this vitality though, right, which is like kind of like your life force energy, this vitality can be tainted by your experiences, because a lot of us will become products of our circumstances because we are programmable. We are radios. We're constantly receiving energy and outputting energy. And because that happens, right, and because that happens, we are constantly being conditioned by our environment, which pulls us further away from ourselves sometimes if you grew up in an environment that was chaotic or an environment that did not nurture you. So your vitality can become compromised. And this whole journey of enlightenment is the journey back to yourself. It's the journey back to those core values that are you, and you being able to set healthy boundaries around that, you being able to advocate and speak up for yourself, you being able to have self-expression around those things and protect and guard them. Okay. Now, it's also responsible for creative power. It's the heart of our being, meaning like our core values come from the sun sign. Inner authority, which helps us to make decisions through intuition and inner guidance. It's a tool for self-development. because it is what you are becoming. Your sun sign is what you are trying to become. This is the path of enlightenment that you must follow back to yourself after life has gotten a hold of you. Now, it's also your central goal. So the sun is the inner light guiding us through life. It is our sense of identity and meant to lead us in our creative pursuits. Pride is also another thing. So this is where we can develop our talents. This is our divine light, which we project out into the world, meaning like what we are contributing to the world. This is what defines us and what we will be remembered for. So it's kind of like our legacy. And self-confidence. Self-confidence comes from the sun as well. So if you think about the absence of the sun, okay, when people are not getting enough sun, what starts to happen? Depression. Okay. So I believe like the whole American dream actually worked against us, because before that, everybody was a traveler. We were moving from place to place. We were living off the land, right? But when they started the whole American dream, getting a house and settling down, now you're inside the house 24/7. So you're disconnected not only from the ground itself, the earth itself, but the sun. Okay. The sun cannot reach you when you're inside the house. And what starts to happen? Depression. If you think about the time that the housing boom happened, you will start to realize how many people started to become depressed. There are actually studies about this, right? So what happens when you're depressed? You lose confidence in yourself. You're mistrusting of other people. You just want to be alone. You isolate yourself. You feel lonely, right? All of those things can be fixed by getting outside, because the sun, again, gives us vitality, which is our life force energy. It recharges us. Okay. But it also gives us self-confidence. Okay. Now, in modern day, we believe orange and yellow flowers are ruled by the sun because we believe orange to be associated with the sun. We also believe St. John's wort's herb to be ruled by the sun because of its ability to treat depression, because when you don't have sun, you get depressed, which is also a gift of the sun. Now, we believe the sun to rule over monarchs, presidents, and heads of state. They are doing black magic when they are doing the presidential ceremonies. Okay, there's stuff that is happening behind the scenes that you do not know about. Okay, because they need the presidents, the monarchs, the kings, the heads of states, they need all of them to worship the sun. Okay. They know that they're worshiping the sun. That's why usually when they have those big ceremonies, the Catholics will come out with that big ass cross that has the circle with the 4 quadrants in the middle, and the cross is literally is creating that 4 quadrant. Yeah. That's the ancient symbol for the sun. They know exactly what they're doing, and they're doing sun worship. They're just not telling you about it. Okay. And once you start looking at the pictures of Jesus, almost every single one of them, he has the sun behind his head. That is not a coincidence, babe. That is not a coincidence. They're playing in your face. April Fool's Day is the day that they're laughing at you. Yeah, because they know that that's supposed to be the beginning of the summertime or springtime. All right, so the sun also signifies the father, and its solar places are considered to be palaces and theaters. Now, this concludes our episode on the sun. In our planetary episodes, we'll discuss the signs that each planet rules briefly, but it won't go deep into the zodiac until we get to that part of the episode, because I really do want us to talk about each zodiac specifically, and also what it means to have them in a specific placement, like sun, moon, Mercury, whatever. We're going to go into great detail in those episodes. So I kind of want to save that for that portion of it. I really hope y'all enjoyed this episode. I know it was a lot of information. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank y'all so much for taking this journey with me. I love y'all deep, and until next time.